All right, we're going to kick off the session, if we may. We've got a really wonderful lineup today. We've 5 presentations, and the topic is Walking to School, Essential Steps to Support This Journey. So we have presentations from all over the world, actually, in this session. And the first 2 presentations are live online, so they will be online presentations, and they're going to share their screen with us. We're going to start with Mr. Walk21, and the title of his presentation is Safe Access to Schools Initiative, a case study from Mumbai. So if you would like to take it away, Rohit, you've got 12 minutes to present, and I'm going to keep you to time if at all possible, so that you can get 1 or 2 questions in before the next speaker comes up.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. So I'm Rohit Clark. I'm from now WRT Design San Francisco, and with me I have my friend, ex-colleague Lakshmi Hirandas, who is a Master's of City Planning student at UC Berkeley. We both worked with the World Resources Institute in Mumbai, and we worked on this project together. So happy to share this case study with you all, creating safer routes to school, safer access to school in Mumbai. The lead for this project was, of course, WRI, and it was supported by the Bloomberg Philanthropies Global Road Safety Initiative and the 3M Safe Access to Schools Initiative, with implementation support from the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai. And the common goal was to provide safer environment for children accessing schools through child-friendly street design interventions while empowering children as the change makers. The approach that we followed was the Count It, Change It, and Scale It 3-staged approach. The Count It involved understanding how road safety around schools in Mumbai, the status of the road safety around schools in Mumbai is, to visualize what possible impact this approach would have for the children in the city. The Change It involved using tactical urbanism as a mean to demonstrate the change through trials, preliminary demonstrations, and which was also aimed to galvanize policymakers and politicians to take this effort further for scaling up by positively impacting them, which was the 3rd stage. So I'm going to talk about the 1st stage. In the context of Mumbai, there are some 2,600 school campuses. And if you draw like 500 meters pedestrian shed around those campuses, around 60% of the total street surface of the city gives access to school or has, walking radius or covers the walking radius around the school areas, which is a huge chunk of land. And when you overlay this with the crash data, the road safety crash data, we observed that, within the 500 meters of ped shed of school, there are some 71% fatal crashes happening, and 84% of those fatal crashes involved vulnerable road users, which were motorcyclists, cyclists, and pedestrians. And if you talk about public schools, a lot of children who go to public schools in Mumbai, they walk to school or they walk to public transport transit stops, and then go to school, and then get off the public transit stops and then walk to school. So there is a huge walking component. So if we are having so many crashes happening around the school's catchment area, then that is not something which we want to continue with. And within those, fatal crashes, there are these 28% of the schools, which are 470 schools in Mumbai, which have more than 3 fatalities that occurred in the last 3 years. So, so the situation is sort of grave. And with this data and mapping of this data, analysis of this data, we could convince the authorities that we need to look at schools as entities, because we do want to make sure that as access to education is the right of every child, so should be the safe access to schools. And we want to make sure that we provide that safe access to each and every children who is going to schools. So the next step And yeah, I mean, this is the famous quote. I'm pretty sure it has come before, it'll come again, that children are kind of indicator species. And if we can build a successful city for children, we will have a successful city for everyone. So if we have streets designed from children's point of view, understanding their needs, expectations, then those streets will be safer and better in terms of experience for everyone. So that's how we approached this project. Um, so to demonstrate this change, out of these 470 schools, then we picked up one school, that is the Christchurch School in the Baikal neighborhood of Mumbai. This is how the access to school right outside of the gate of the school looks like. It's like that shared space, which is where you will see parents waiting to pick up school children, pedestrians walking. There are a lot of businesses running around that. A lot of street vendors selling stuff around the school's gates during the assembly and departure hours. There is the normal traffic that is going, and then a traffic personnel trying to manage the activities around the school, which of course is not sufficient. These are the main stakeholders for this project. The administrative stakeholders involved, the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai's politicians, councillors, and then institutional stakeholders involved, the school principals, Parents Teachers Association, and the key stakeholders, the community, that's the parents of the school children, and then the school students. So we work closely with the community and all the stakeholders to develop this design proposal that we implemented. Before we started working with the school children, we tried to understand how children are different than other street users, mainly because they are growing. Their anthropometry is different than adults, so they have a different field of vision. And they have a growing or developing cognitive skills. So we need to incorporate this while we are designing streets or any entities in the public realm, understanding how children will react or interact with them. So we did a photo walk around the school with the school children, try to understand what are the things they like and what are the things they dislike. So we use this framing exercise. So green is the thing that they see at their eye level and they like, and red frame is the thing that they do not like. We documented this, we analyzed it, and then coded it to come up with design recommendations. And then we also conducted focus group discussion where various exercises, depending on the age group of the children, were designed as per their cognitive skills to understand what are the things they want to see as they commute to school. And I'm not going to go over all these things, but we for each of this age group, we got like unique ideas from children, which we try to incorporate in our design proposal. And I'll hand over it to Lakshmi to walk us through the design.
Thank you, Rohit. So as Rohit mentioned, the design essentially evolved from what we understood from the children, what the children told us. And it all started with the school zone delineation, which is the identification of what is a school zone in the Indian context. So we identified this 200 meters approximate length, which started from the nearest intersection and extended all the way up to the nearest transit stop. So this we defined as the school zone. And then this is the transformation that we are looking at. This transformation actually consists of 5 core principles. And we start with channelizing the vehicle carriageway, basically to sort of allow vehicles continuous movement and give them contiguous road space. Also to reclaim the residual spaces so that they can be used for other on-street activities. The next principle of regulate looks at regulating vehicular speeds and incorporating traffic calming measures into the street. So you can see the school zone speed limit signage, as well as speed humps and other mandatory signages for the street. This helps to kind of protect the crossings, ensure that vehicles are calmed while they are in the school zone, and also it helps to give an identity to the school zone. After regulating, the next step is to then organize the street edges. So this looks at incorporating other street activities into the street space, which includes bus stops, parking spaces, multi-utility zones, waiting spaces for people to cross, etc. So once we have channelized, regulated, and organized the street, we look at allocating the footpath spaces for different footpath activities. So the primary activity of a footpath or a sidewalk is to provide clear walking spaces, which is, in this case, we determined it to be 2 meters clear contiguous walking space through the school zone, and also to provide waiting spaces for parents and guardians, as well as for people to cross. The rest of the area was then divided between on-street vending as well as shop front spaces. The last step in designing a school zone was to activate the school zone. Now, activation happens at 3 different levels because children experience the street environment at 3 different levels in a way. So the first level is that of at-grade activation, which looks at the ground plane, which includes the sidewalk surfaces, your pedestrian crossings, anything which is below the eye level of the children. And this is extremely important for smaller kids whose plane of reference is always the horizontal plane. So this included making the pedestrian crossings interactive or colorful, having small sidewalk games to interest the children, and also providing guide strips for differently abled students. The above grade activation looks at elements which are at the eye level of the child. So this includes making sure that the planters and the planter boxes, all the signages are readable by students and they are within their field of vision and not way too high or way too low. It also included providing interactive guardrails and bollards, because a lot of times these are elements which interest the children and helps them to interact with the urban environment more. And the last bit of activation, or the last stage of activation, was the edge activation. This included activating both the built and the unbuilt edges. So we looked at the shop fronts, the boundary walls, as well as the vending zones, to make sure that we create a 3-dimensional envelope for the children to walk through on their way to school. So at the end of the design process, this is what we envision the school zone to be: a safe, vibrant, universally accessible, and comfortable space for all users. After the COVID pandemic in India, we got the chance to sort of test this out using tactical urbanism as a tool. So we used, paints, barricades, and temporary signages to install the design and test the design elements. In this process, we also ensured that children are as much as a participant. As much participant as the other stakeholders, and this gave them a chance to transform their school zone by themselves and also sort of empowered them as change makers. So this is the extent of the transformation that we carried out. And so the transformation actually included road marking signages, delineating the school zone, providing a vibrant pedestrian crossing, and providing bulb outs for waiting, and also activating the footpath spaces using colorful markings, providing speed calming measures. And after the transformation, we also conducted a very comprehensive qualitative and quantitative analysis using different types of surveys. So this included understanding the motorist behavior as well as the street user perception. So from this survey, we got a very positive responses in terms of school zone delineation, being that 29% more motorists realized that there is a school in the vicinity, and they acted accordingly, which meant that they were more compliant at pedestrian crossings. Also, the number of people waiting at designated pedestrian crossings to cross increased by 10 times. Other positive impacts included increase in pedestrian usage, increase in positive pedestrian behavior. Also, the street user perception, including those of children and motorists, were positively impacted. So this is the final sort of outcome that we got after the transformation. Now, Rohit will take it.
Great, thank you. So yeah, after we demonstrated this change, of course, there was a lot of attention to this project, not just from the school students, but also the local community, the local politicians, and the city's policymakers. And that's what we wanted. We wanted to scale up the impact of this work and make most of the schools areas in Mumbai to be safer, at least those which are the higher priority ones, the 470 schools that we showcased at the beginning. So how did we scale it up, or how did we work to scale it up? So the three components to scale up.
Rohit, can you hear me? You've got about 30 seconds left, okay, on the presentation?
Sure. Yeah, I just need 10 seconds. Thank you. The components to scale up were the media, the local community, and the policymakers. The media really, since the beginning of the project, which started in 2019, December, they actually were behind it, and they were like, okay, this is going to be a very positive change for our school children who are future citizens. So there was a positive coverage throughout. The community, the school children, the parents, teachers, they all rallied around this project. And because tactical urbanism allowed them to see the change and believe what it's going to be like when it's permanently transformed. So they were like, okay, we want this change. We want safe access to schools. So these kind of community-led or community-involved transformations helped us to push the project for implementation. And lastly, the city of Mumbai has allocated $6.5 million for 50 schools and started Maji Shara Surakshit Shara, that is My School, Safe School program at the city level to scale up the impact of this initiative. So that's it from us. Thank you very much.
There's one thing that we do in physical activity conferences where to break sitting, because sitting for a long period of time is not really good for your health. And also to really acknowledge our speakers. At the end of every talk, we ask for a standing applause. So if people want to do a standing applause.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
For one question, if there's one question from Rohit, does anyone want to? Yeah, and if you can shout so they can hear you.
Yes, you can hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, it's a very nice step, I think, to change school environments. But do you also notice that there are less cars and more people who go by bike or by foot?
That's a great question. If I understood it correctly, you asked more people came there by bike or by foot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this particular school, 43% of the children walked to school because they lived in the catchment area of the school. Biking is not a commonly used mode, mostly because there is no infrastructure. But there are school students, like less than 5% actually biked to school. And remaining 50% were using public transport or private vehicles to come to school.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. So moving on to, and thank you very much for your presentation. Moving on to the next presentation, this comes all the way from Korea. And it is by Dr. Sung-Hoon Oh, and it's entitled New School Zone Paradigms in Korea, based on traffic accident analysis. So if I could ask our friendly neighborhood technical person to cue it up, that would be great. Super, thank you very much.
Hi, every dear workers here. I'm Sung-Hoon Oh. I'm working for Architecture and Urban Research Institute, which is one of the national research institutes in Korea. Today, I want to share with you my recent study outcome about the school zone improvement. The project was funded by the Ministry of Administration and Safety in Korea. As you can see, so many people have been killed and injured in the street across many borders. You can see that Korea has made a moderate reduction in the traffic sacrifices over 15 years, but still ranks relatively low compared to other OECD nations. In fact, these numbers of traffic sacrifices are the result of an unacceptable and unethical urban circulation system, I think. The political priority of urban circulation speed related to automobiles has not been significantly considered enough to change our fundamental safety level for pedestrians in streets. In Korea, reduced the death toll of pedestrians more than 20% in 80 years. It does not seem to be a bad result. But in this moment, in order to proceed on death toll level of safety, I think we should consider the details of the street situation. The victims of traffic violence are not equally distributed among age groups. The number of children sacrificed has decreased significantly in Korea. Can you take this result as just general success of schools in Korea? There is some suspicious numbers on the table. It is the number of senior pedestrians. Why does safety level is not improved? Why the children's level is rising? If you student discriminate of pedestrian environment in a neighborhood, why does senior pedestrians not get environmental benefits in the street?
Sorry to disturb.
The children is not from the school to effect of ameliorating environment in the neighborhood, but many from the school staff or voluntary caregivers in the school time. We suppose the low level of safety level for senior pedestrians living in the same environment result from the absence of caregivers against the versus street. Therefore, I had to review the children accident and viewpoint of the spatial context or our existing school zone. The review is to find out the real safety effect of school zones in a district. In Korea, we only suggested school zone designation targets consist of elementary school, kindergarten, special school, pre-kindergarten, private academy, and foreign school. In fact, almost every publicly funded education institute are furnished with a school zone around this site. We can see the high school zone designation percentages, except for the private sector here. Quantitatively, the school zone project in Korea seems to be almost completed. In view of legal regulations, a series of improvement actions are continuing in recent years in Korea. In school zone, speed control CCTV became mandatory in 2021, and street parking is generally prohibited in school zone. In 2022, traffic-related fine for drivers has been tripled in school zone, and drivers must stop before every crossover without traffic signal in school zone. This legal change resulted from the couple of serious deadly child accidents in the street, reported nationally, which reminded the people of the unethical safety situation. Though the regulations became reinforced in the school zone, the physical settings of the school zone street remains unsatisfactory level to the children and for the pedestrians in the street. There are a lot of sidewalks too narrow or impaired to walk on. Therefore, children will walk along the car lane for their convenience, in spite of the risk from cars. So the related agency installed pedestrian fences to stop the car lane walking, which makes them walk from the beginning of the fences in the car lane in order to hatch inconvenience in narrow or improper sidewalk in the school zone. The more tries to lock up the children in the sidewalks in bad conditions, the more dangerous the streets are. At this point, excessive safety fence seems not for the pedestrians. Human beings need to have more visual and behavioral access options in the street. Still fence on the narrow sidewalk is showing the lack of understanding children's experience in the street. Children need more walkable space, more visual access, and want to cross the street more frequently. The inadequate fences such as securing the car drivers right away, far from the pedestrians' safety in this way. There have been so many talks about traffic calming approach in school zone, but the car speed is still high, and we cannot let the children walk to school safely without any help. Therefore, a lot of staff and volunteers have answered the yellow flag to protect the children going to school from the crowd and rivals. If the caregivers were gone in the school zone, the children will be in greater danger in the street. In Korea, much of the safety budget has been assigned to the installment and operation of speed control CCTV for school zone. Control speed limit in school zone is 30 kilometers per hour. The CCTV approach is effect on drivers in the school zone, but has some limits as well. First, the view angle and recognition distance is not enough to monitor long street in school zone.
Sorry, guys.
Secondly, the number of CCTV in a school zone.
The online audience can't see it properly, so I'm just going to have to redo something with the video, if that's okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Hi, every workers here. Hi, every workers here. I'm someone more.
Sorry, I'm very conscious of time, and I have a speaker who's live online and two face-to-face speakers waiting to present. So one, can we fast forward to where we were in the presentation, and two, if we can't get it to work, maybe the remote access can access it at a later time?
Just the organizer just asked me to do this quickly, so I'm just going to see if I can get this done for you. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody workers here. I'm someone more. I'm working for us. The inadequacies such as the securing the car was vitally great, far from the pedestrians' safety in this way. There have been so many talks about traffic calming approaching school zone, but the car speed is still high that it cannot let the children walk safely without help. Therefore, a lot of staff and volunteers have answered the yellow flag to protect the children going to school from the car rivals. If the caregivers were gone in the school zone, the children will be in greater danger in the street. In Korea, much of the safety budget has been assigned to the installment and operation of speed control CCTV for school zone. Control speed limit in school zone is 30 kilometers per hour. The CCTV approach is effect on drivers in the school zone, but has some limits as well. First, the view angle and recognition distance is not enough to monitor long street in school zone area. Secondly, the number of CCTV in a school zone is confined from the budget size, which makes the larger area of school zone not monitored by CCTV. In addition, the dependency on CCTV weakens the human enforcement activity by police officers or supervising activity by school staff in the school zone. Human surveillance and involvement against the car drivers in the school zone can be directly effective, though speed-based CCTV regulation lacks in capturing the subtle behavioral problem in the schools and I think. Temporal car-free streets is another important option for the school zones, especially in the school time. The high density of children and workers can be properly protected by the car-free streets. But the public agencies are still hesitating to adopt the apparent alternative, worrying about the pushback from the car drivers. So for example, street zone without enough sidewalk needs to be car-free during the school time. In order to analyze current school zone situation, extent data in existing school zone are collected and spatially examined by focal area from the main gate of the protected school. The measured and analyzed elements are a number of pedestrian extent in school zone in the buffer area of 300 meters and 500 meters in 150 elementary schools. The table in Korean language is an example of survey card for schools. After that, 86% occur out of school zone. Among total 1,901 extents in the sample area. Only 14% of the pedestrian extents are in the school zone. The buffer area from 300 meters to 500 meters in radius accounts for 49% of the extent. We can see most of the extent occurs out of school zone here. Current school zone is designated to one with several streets near the main gate of the protected facility, which means it does not reach the whole pedestrian circulation system. The safety level is not enough in block level of pedestrian district with a radius of 500 meters on the whole. Among 712 extent occurs in the buffer zone of radius 300 meters, excluding school zone. 65% occurs in the street without sidewalk, while 35% in the street with sidewalk. Streets without sidewalk is almost 2 times dangerous in the buffer zone of 300 meters, which means the more concern must be focused on the narrow street without sidewalk in the block, compared to the streets with the sidewalks. Current school zone is designated up to 300 meters from the main gate of the school. But the zone is to be expanded because 73% of the total extent occurs in the area beyond the radius of 300 meters. Almost every school zone is designated on the streets of 80 meters to 150 meters range in front of the school, which explains that the area with radius 100 meters shows the lowest level of extent, only 9%. Therefore, I would say that school zone must be expanded to the whole block considering this always up here. According to the outcome of the research, I suggested a new standard model of school zone to the Ministry of Administration and Safety in Korea. In the existing school zone, only a few streets are selectively designated as a school zone. In the new standard model, the whole block should be protected as a school zone, surrounded with a safer street with the sidewalk. In the typical blocks in Korea, there is no sidewalk system in a street in a block. That's why we should make some more block-wise approach for the school zoning in this district. Because every street in the block cannot be car-free. With residents' negative reactions, streets without sidewalk are secured as safe routes, which connect the main gate of the school and the block surrounding the streets with the sidewalk. Safe routes must be car-free around the school hours, and the children pickup place can be located in the block edge with the sidewalk for the parents. These are the example of pedestrian-friendly street surface design which can be widely adopted to secure the safe working environment in school zones. New standard model is strongly suggested to design the safe routes with walking-friendly features like this. As you know, smart ballers, parking and speeding CCTV, parking sensors are considered to enhance the walking priority and regulate car drivers in school zone. Gateway and surface sign are important as well in order to remind the car drivers the children are walking and playing in the street. Several traffic calming designs such as safety median, coverage tension, raised crossing must apply to school zone in general. This is not a brand new design element, but it is not generally and widely adopted in the schools and currently in Korea. Yep. For location types of the school, I've examined considering the relations between the school and the block. And the more specific strategies are suggested in the manual for new standard school zone model for the local governments. The manual involves the planning and design process and examples of design simulation for the improved school zone. I used the details of the manual, so it can be widely adopted towards. There must be some variation for the specified site situation. These are the related examples for the street design for the pedestrian and shared street situation, which can be applied directly for the safe routes in the school zone. Our new model consists of the block-wise school zoning approach, temporary coffee street, traffic calming, and walking-friendly design. In the school zone improvement projects, there should be more feedback and upgrade our manual. Please share related knowledge and experience with us in order to secure our beautiful children and our future. Thank you very much.
Very much. Very interesting about how maybe we've been successful 100 meters from schools, but once you go beyond that, the level of accidents and the increase. Very interesting on that. We've already had a presentation from Mumbai, or based in Mumbai. We have a presentation there based in Korea. We're now moving to Rio de Janeiro, where Ms. Danielle Hopp from the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy in Brazil is going to present on streamlining the Safe Routes to School program in Rio de Janeiro. So Danielle, if you would, 12 minutes for the presentation, and then that will give you time for 1 or 2 questions afterwards. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you see my full screen? Yeah, okay, thanks. So, well, hello everyone, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning. So, I'm Danielle Hope. I work as Active Mobility Manager at ITDP Brazil, and I'm joining you from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where the spring is almost starting. And I will be talking about the Safe Routes to School initiative implemented by ITDP in collaboration with the City of Rio and the support of the FIA Foundation last year. And giving you a brief introduction on ITDP, we are an international nonprofit promoting equitable and sustainable mobility, mainly in the Global South. And to give you a brief overview of the road safety context in Brazil, about 32,000 people die on our roads and streets every year. Our fatality rate is around 15 per 100,000 people. And sadly enough, traffic crashes are the leading cause of unintentional death among children aged between 0 and 14 years old in Brazil. And more than 1,100 children died in 2017. So in Brazil, the situation is not different, although we don't really have great data to tell you that. And we know that between 40 and 60% of students in the public system, which are mostly medium to low income, walk to school. And Rio has about 1,500 schools in the public system. So it's a lot. But as a society, we still don't accept the responsibility that the responsibility for crashes and fatalities is not only from road users, but it's still distributed through the full transportation system. Also include the policymakers, designers, and traffic engineers. So we still in the very beginning of this school area and the safe streets design issues, and I guess we're running behind with, even if from India and from the example here from Korea. We still have a long way to go. But we can say that the road user behavior programs are well established in Brazilian cities, since it's a national requirement by law. Okay, by law, cities are required to allocate 5% of the resources from traffic violation fines to education. But most of the traffic education programs, they concentrate in teaching children to respect the traffic regulations and end up telling them that the car is the owner of the street, since it represents the greatest risk for them. And the city of Rio has, however, since 2008, a traffic education program with a slightly broader focus called On the Way to School. So in addition to behavioral issues, this program has always sought to incorporate elements of the safe systems approach, showing, for example, that slowing down vehicles and implementing proper traffic signals, it's also important, or it's also an important part of child safety. And with the participation of teachers and students, the program has been trying to link traffic education with the appropriation of public spaces by the school community, and also trying to involve them in the real transformation of the school area. The teachers are instructed to prepare, together with students, road safe diagnosis of the school area, generating what they call a risk map, in which children identify points where they feel unsafe and they can propose solutions. So although the final objective has always been to achieve the implementation of road safety improvements in the school areas, by 2020, out of more than 600 schools served with the program, many had crosswalks installed in front of the school, but not more than that, right? Only a handful of them had more significant road safety improvements implemented. So there was this understanding from parts of the technicians that the streets need to be safely designed, but they would hardly get into implementation because of disconnection inside the city, because of it was not understood as a priority, right? So in 2021, we came in to help improve this program so they could more easily reach the final goal of increasing pedestrian safety. And we did this through a pilot initiative, which was conceived as a tool to sensitize a group of 15 technicians of the traffic engineering company who coordinate the work at the borough level. Then we started a parallel process with the technicians, with the schools. At that time, we were still operating hybrid mode. So we started by suggesting criteria for school selection. To join the program, the schools, they have to apply for it. So, and they had a waiting list of more than 90 schools. And just as I mentioned before, to give you an idea, Rio has about 1,500 public school units. So for the selection, we based ourselves on the number of crashes within a radius of 300 meters from the school, and also on the number of other public facilities in the area, based on the assumption that the greater the flow of pedestrians is in the area, the greater the impact of the intervention will be. We held 6 workshops with the group of technicians, including field inspections based on different methodologies and others, to discuss the street design changes that were going to be implemented. And throughout the process, the program gained more value within the traffic engineering company and was taken by the president to the mayor. And the mayor approved the idea and encouraged the actions to gain more scale in 2022. So after about 6 months of work, we finally had the pilot implemented with low-cost materials and many problems to be solved, but it was an important step for them. We managed to have good coverage by the local press, even working in a local income area. There was like about 30 kilometers from the city center, which is not that easy, but we attribute that to the great interest of the society when it comes to action involving the education and life of children. And most importantly, the pilot was already launched as the first action of a new program. So that now it's called On the Way to School 2.0. and it aims to implement intervention in at least 18 schools by the end of this year. We prepared 2 publications. One is the pilot case study, and the other the new internal guidelines of the program. And a few months later, they had the first replication. So, and the program also became part of a citywide initiative focused on education and participation. So the team was all proud of their involvement at the end, which was at the beginning was a resistance, became like a proud feeling. And the city set the goal of implementing these 18 interventions by the end of this year. And so far, they've completed around 10. They have more to come. And of course, there's still a long way to go in terms of design quality, implementation, monitoring, integration of other with other city departments, so the interventions then can be like in a broader scale, especially when you will have like more critical road safety issues. But it's been an important step for this agenda in Rio. And myself and this great team are available to discuss further details if anyone would like to. We have a video about the pilot intervention. It's on the conference website. And thank you for your invitation. I hope to be there in person the next time.
Wonderful. Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, and right on time. So we have lots of time for questions from the audience. So if you're going to ask a question, could I ask you just to introduce yourself and say who you are and where you're from? As you're thinking of a question, if I may just ask you one, when you refer to children, Danielle, what ages are you talking about? Are they, what ages were the children in schools?
Good question. They are between 8 and 11, or depends on the school.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. The question?
Yeah, sure. My name is Angie Schmidt. I'm from the United States. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. So my question is for Danielle. You mentioned there was a curriculum where they were providing the schools throughout Rio that allowed children to propose interventions. Is that correct? Like directly to the proper authorities?
Well, it's not the curriculum itself. It's this program that is organized and implemented by the traffic engineering company education department. So the schools, they have to apply to take part in this program. And yes, this exists since 2008, but it was always like, it had always been stopping only on the education parts. The children would propose recommendations, and the traffic engineering company would they would sometimes take a look at it and take it into consideration in their plans, but it was like the interventions were just as I mentioned, but sometimes it was just like a pedestrian crossing in front of the school. It was not really a broader approach. So the idea was to really bridge this gap between what the students and the school community is proposing and what the traffic engineering are debating about at that area, or even like, or sometimes they are not debating about those areas. So, and it starts the debates about those areas.
Okay, thank you. Do we have one more question? An observation on that is, Danielle, you received a lot of media attention, which is really powerful, or can be very powerful when you're trying to change minds, particularly maybe in restricting traffic or changing access to roads. How important was that working with the children to building that citizen science and that buy-in with the citizens in relation to the work you were trying to do?
I think it was very important and crucial. Without that, we wouldn't have been successful.
Richard.
Thank you, Danielle. Obviously, you're using practical urbanism type tools, paints and bollards. Some of those over time may fade, the bollards may get knocked over. How sustainable is this? Is there talk about a long-term funding to make some of those permanent, or what's the thinking?
That's still the biggest challenge in the global south, I would say, not only in Brazil, because we are still very behind. We are still trying to convince them that change is important. So that's why we work mostly, and I do believe in tactical urbanism as a tool to change the mindset. I don't think this should be the permanent solution ever, but we still haven't got there. And that's our big challenge right now is the quality of the public space, and it's the conservation, the maintenance. It's still it's still lots to do. But I guess it's part of the process, right?
Yeah, and you have to start somewhere. So wonderful. Thank you very much, Danielle. I'm now going to invite Richard up for his presentation. So we have Mr. Richard Clark. There's Richard. And Richard is going to speak to you today from London in the UK on school streets, school zones, lessons from around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Let's wait for the presentation to come up. I can't sit here. Is there a way I can sit on? It's only on here. Okay. Thank you. So this is a presentation on a report I put together, which came out in April this year. And you can see the cover of the report there around school streets around the world. This was aiming to pull together a compendium of all the different examples of school streets that exist. And I'll talk a little bit about the background of that and what I mean by school streets. Yeah, here we go. It's a little bit of the FAO Foundation. You've heard a little bit about us from other organisations. We fund work. We also do global advocacy and safety and fair and free mobility. We've been around about 20 years around making roads safe, but also around climate and clean air, streets for life, working with a range of different partners at a range of different levels. One of those initiatives that we're involved in is called the Child Health Initiative, where we work with a range of partners. You can see some of those along the bottom. The Safe Systems approach is a really important part of what we do. A safe and healthy journey to school for every child by 2030 is one of our key aims. And that links to a whole range of international agendas. So my starting point for this and discovering about school streets was around 5 years ago. We put together a case study report in London, looking at a lot of the work that London was doing around air pollution and the impacts air pollution has on children. A big agenda of them there, and something that a lot of data was showing was a massive issue. And you can see this report, which pulled together both evidence and some of the examples of the interventions that were being tried. At that point, there was 1 or 2 school streets in London. The first one is in the bottom left there, that's Camden, the first school street in London. And what I mean by school streets is a car-free area outside school where they're closed to vehicles or have severely restricted access, often at weekly pace, with a very limited number of vehicles, normally just for a short period at the start and the end of the school day, although some have to be car-free. Now that's the definition I've used here because I've been trying to count them. We'll get into definitional blur boundaries and things like that. In terms of what they are, I think these 3 headlines as well, this kind of give a feel for why this is important. Children first rather than vehicles first. A whole range of different impacts in terms of reducing stress, noise pollution, risk of injury, encouraging physical activity, social connections, other benefits. As a tactical urbanism type intervention, they can be simple and no costs. Temporary approaches, although technology can be used as well. And then just finally around the fact that there's evidence that this works or that they make a difference. And we've measured in a whole range of different ways. I'll come on to that. The report is quite long, has a lot of detail. 12 minutes, I'm not going to do justice. So I'm going to try and whiz through some of the information and give you a bit of information that you can go and look at further. So this is the kind of the growth in school streets. The first school streets as we know it is commonly back to Bolzano in northern Italy in 1989. You see there haven't been many increase since then, but then around the 2010s there was a big European-wide project which kind of propagated the idea, and a number of cities experimented with the idea, including Canada, an example, but Edinburgh, other places have experimented as well. And then, of course, you see this massive increase around 2019, 2020. Some of that was increasing before the pandemic, but in terms of an intervention to create additional space around schools, a lot of areas which had already piloted the idea and had a proof of concept were able to significantly ramp it up. For example, London, Paris as well, significantly ramped it up. So in terms of the counting, well over 1,000 school streets around the world, across a whole range of areas and countries. This is my attempt at a list. If you know of any others, please let me know. There are others since April already, but this is the kind of definitive list in terms of what I was able to document from a range of different countries. You'll see a lot of these are based in Europe, but there are other pilots in North America and other regions as well. Australasia, a couple of examples. This is where we get a little bit into the boundaries. Some of them call themselves school streets, but aren't completely closed to vehicles. Others don't call themselves school streets, but share some of the similar characteristics. So there's a bit of blurred boundaries. So Spain, Albania, New Zealand, I've included as a kind of annex at the bottom. And we'll come on to the discussion around, what's a school street, what's a school zone, when do you use each, what the benefits of each, etc. I think that's an interesting discussion to have. Hopefully we'll begin to talk about that. So I've said school streets continue to expand. As an example, I saw recently from Copenhagen and other ones from across the UK, France, and I'm sure there's others as well that you know of. Talk about the evidence of supporting school streets. Range of evidence exists. This is an Irish little infographic showing some of the benefits. Interesting studies from Belgium looking at the actual impacts on children's health, right down to the respiratory impacts, as well as London has done an impact looking at the reduction in air pollution around schools. But in Belgium, they're actually looking at what that meant for the children's health itself. Again, it's very interesting, and all the evidence seems to support school streets around that. How was change possible? Now, I can't go through all of these. They're listed in the report. The idea was to do a kind of political economy analysis. I've mentioned most of these already, so I'm not going to go into that. But ultimately about happy and healthy children, and something that is relatively easy to implement, at least in terms of the closing the streets, physical elements. There are other challenges around legal and sign up from different authorities. So this is on the practicalities. Again, there's lots of guidance and toolkits out there which start to address some of these. But these are all things which have to be considered and have been worked through by those who have implemented them. So I'm not going to go into all the detail, but gathering and engaging stakeholders is important. Understanding how you actually close a road in your municipality, what processes you need to go through, talk to local councillors or the equivalent, getting funding, etc. We talked about making changes permanent. Paris has done quite a lot of work in terms of making some of their school streets permanent, doing reading and things like that. And then lastly, I think is important, the need for the wider safety improvements. I think one of the interesting things, most of the countries where this has been tried is countries which already have implemented things like 30 kilometres an hour zones. So this is a kind of a bonus step. An interesting question is, actually, could you leapfrog to this step or kind of incorporate this as part of an intervention as a first step, or how would you phase these things? I think that's an interesting question, considering this is a relatively low-cost thing to close a road. Could you close a road in Africa or Latin America? Intuitively, there's no reason you couldn't. Would that be your highest priority? I think that's an interesting question. So in terms of what's led change, So international projects, sharing ideas, strong leadership from the mayors and things like that, really important. Obviously, not to say countries which haven't implemented don't have strong leadership, but the countries which have managed to do it up to the Mayor City Prime, that bottom left picture, has been crucial to success. Campaign groups, backing the idea, people working together. A couple of case studies here. One from The Hague, where the idea came from a local council official who then got real strong support from the mayor who wanted to implement it. And they expanded it to 15 streets across the city. And it was inspired by looking at what had been possible in Belgium. They were then able to transfer that quite easily to the Netherlands. And then in North America, Canada, 880 cities have done some quite pioneering work, trying to work out how you could do this in Canada. Some of the challenges they face are, in some countries there is a process for establishing school street. In Canada at the time there wasn't. So first time you do it, you've got to reinvent the process or invent a process, which then hopefully can be formalised. Thank you. So this is the kind of interesting bit, I guess, is trying to look at what is a school street, what is a school zone, trying to get some kind of typology in terms of car-free spaces versus kind of modifications to the street, permanent changes and temporary changes. And there are similarities between school streets and car-free days. There are similarities between school streets and superblock concepts, things like that. So I think all of these are part of the mix of possibilities out there, and in some cases they merge and look quite like each other. In other areas they can actually be kind of school street, which there were some examples where people just put planters in and said this is a school street, but cars still went up and down. There was no enforcement, and it didn't really make much difference. Whereas others have been very successful. So that's interesting. School streets versus school zones. I mean, as we've seen, some of these pictures are showing some school zones which actually they may not have completely removed vehicles from the space, but they significantly increase the space to pedestrians and take vehicles. Is that an equally good thing, or could some of these go further? Obviously, some of the school streets are more appropriate on maybe secondary roads rather than main roads. There's challenges there, but certainly not to downplay the importance of some of these other kinds of interventions as well. See one from Albania on the right there. The concrete bollards that they use there. So these are the recommendations from the report. I think I've probably said most of them. I think taking a citywide approach is one part of COVID-19. A lot of these interventions were done alongside new cycle lanes, local traffic neighbourhoods, or equivalents as well, and obviously 30 km/h zone speed limits. The importance of considering could this work in low middle income countries is important for organisations like ours to consider, and organisations who work. Can we share this knowledge? Is there any reason why this should only be happening in high income countries? And I think another step was one of the key drivers in London and Northern Europe in particular was that people understood the impacts of air pollution because it's been measured over the past 5 or 10 years. I think measuring the impacts of air pollution in cities, particularly in the global south as well, might also increase the case for this kind of intervention, which removes the vehicles from the streets as well. So that's something we also support. I think it's important. Briefly, I've mentioned toolkits. There's a whole range of toolkits from a range of organisations, and Hackney has a very good guide as well. So I think I will finish there, but there's some great resources. Thank you.
Can I invite some questions from the audience for Richard? And can you just introduce yourself?
Lieve Snoeks, Opvoedingsplan, Belgium.
Okay.
I
yours.
Presentation. Thanks a lot. If someone wants to get a link to the study of the lungs of the children, I can give it. Because with us in Belgium, at a few schools, they do the study. And after a few weeks, the lungs of the children were better. And they looks at the children and it's better. So I can give it. It's not something like that. It's true. It's true. I can give it. So no problem. And also with us in Belgium and founders, it's also in the law. I don't know it in England. Is it also in the law? School streets?
In what sense? You mean the highway code or the kind of like every school has to have one?
The law, The law. Yeah.
Right. What do you mean by that then? What's the implications of the law?
Yeah. Het is leuk in kunstschapen eigenlijk. Dat je niet eens in scholen, eigenlijk is het opgenomen is in wetgeving.
So if it's in the law, in the code, then it's easier to enforce it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
My colleagues.
No worries. Yeah. So I know one of the things I cover in the reports. If you look at the reports, I tried to include as many links and resources as possible, so that it's hyperlinked all the way through it, which hopefully is useful for others. So hopefully it's a go-to place. But yes, I think things like the highway code and things like having the right signage to use just makes it very easy to be replicated. I know in lots of other countries that doesn't yet exist, but it doesn't mean it's not possible.
And if people want to access your report?
So you go to the FIA Foundation website, there's a resources section. It's the second one there. So.
Okay, yeah.
Right, okay. Hi, Dave O'Connor, to Dublin. Is there any research on, well, this is more from experience or anecdotal evidence, that the first 30 metres outside school, so children will socialise in school anyway, but that first 30 metres are absolutely the amount of socialisation with parents in that, because the parents plan out. But in that zone, there's a lot of interactions. And that itself is good for the well-being of the children. If they make a connection. Is there any research into that?
Yeah, good question. Research. There's certainly lots of anecdotal evidence, and certainly the evaluations show that it's well received and people really appreciate it. I think you said as well the logic of concentrate, like that is where the numbers are going to be greatest concentrated in terms of the mix between children and people going as well. So focusing on that area obviously allows you to kind of maximise that impact, but then obviously like people in communities, the wider area is important as well. So I probably just said what you said, but I think it's fairly intuitive. I don't know of any studies. That doesn't mean they don't exist. Others
Okay, I am conscious of time for our last speaker. Did you want to ask a quick question?
Just around the leadership bit and seeing patterns of people more successfully delivered or longer lasting or better received when they were led by, for example, a local authority from the outset, or is the more impact if it's a teacher or a parent?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think all of the ones which are successful probably do all of those to some extent. So I think if you can have everyone aligned, then that's really important. Where you have people kind of campaigning and trying to persuade the local authority, then I think that's a longer process. I think if it only comes from the top and the community don't understand it, I mean, often the way where it's worked is local authorities have piloted it in the schools or the areas where it's most receptive. So they have a process for identifying which ones are most likely to want it. And so where you have that alignment of all those interests, where it's been most successful. Though somewhere like Hackney has now rolled it out to I think around 50% of schools and is planning to do it in all of their schools. So yeah, that's central London. So that is quite unique. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Richard. A wonderful presentation. We have a new outcome measure now that we're going to potentially think about. You know, I'm from public health. We think about minutes of physical activity. We think about air pollution, but what about social capital? Social capital and the impact that these street zones or safe streets have on the social capital of the school community. And the point about policy, and very often policy interventions within a school setting relate to things like physical education, extracurricular class breaks, but there is a gap between the link between the school and the transport, and how school can influence policy and transport can work with schools to help them. Yeah, that is one of the weak links between school. School kind of stops the school gates, but in actual fact, the parents, the community, the power of that and that. So we're moving closer to home for our final presentation. So we've gone all around the globe almost, and now we're back home to Ireland. And I'm delighted to welcome Miss Fionnuala O'Driscoll and her team from the National Transport Authority. And they're going to speak to us about designing playful school zones and the wider Safe Routes to School program.
Okay. Thanks, Catherine. So actually, I'm just one of three, and it's Tracy from the Safe Routes to School program. It's manager of Safe Routes to School, part of Natasha, and me, who's from Dublin City, is going to also talk. So I'm on a strict time limit. You're gonna. I've got 4 minutes. It's great to see all of the. Sorry, it's this way. Yeah. Look, outline the presentation by leaving the 3 things. The as is not acceptable. You'll see lots of photographs here that look the same as Chile, as Korea, as India, you know, just everyone pumping their cars as near as they can to the school and hoping that their kids can get out safely. But while not really understanding or caring about the impacts they're having. The as is not acceptable. We've designed a program and the schools have to opt into it. And a quarter of the schools in Ireland have opted in, so 930 schools have opted in. There'll be a while dealing with them, but it's great hunger that's there, and we're delighted to work with them. It's on the back of a behaviour change program which has been running for 10 years, and so now we're called the Green Schools Travel Program. One of the presenters was here earlier. So we've got a lot of kind of social capital within schools that have children forming committees to push for change. We have a design guide, which I think I'm proud to say was probably one of the quickest design guides to come out of Ireland, and on school streets, on school zones, and routes to school. So I'd really recommend you take this. It's available. You can just Google Safe Routes to School Design Guide Ireland, and that will come up. And it's got lots of great case studies at the back. And that's before we started implementing the program. That was from the Green Schools program, and then. Tracy will talk to you about the program and how it's data driven and from the ground up, with schools opting in, and then Niamh will talk about stories from the street really, and Dublin City's experience of putting in about 60 of these school zones in a year. So there you go. Look, it's the same story everywhere. Schools don't realise this; they think their school is unique, and they really get shocked that it's because they only see outside their school. And they do think it's unique. It's everywhere. And these are good people. They're your neighbours. Sometimes they're yourself. And you hope the car up as possible as close as you can get if it's raining or you're in a hurry or whatever, But it's not acceptable. There will be a time when people look back on these and they go, what are you doing that? It's like, how could you do that? Like, this will become unacceptable. And look, school travel needs attention. Road safety in Ireland, it is, as well as a lot of our other presenters mentioned, it's the number 1 cause of child mortality. The number 1 cause of child mortality. Road traffic accidents. Air quality is a big issue. We flipped in Ireland, as Joe was talking about, if you're at the plenary in the 90s, from active travel to car-based travel. So 60% of Irish children are driven to school. The average distance to school in an urban area is still under a kilometre. And then we consider ourselves sort of a rural county. It's 1.5 kilometres the national average distance to school. We've got a very big problem with obesity. We're up there at top European levels of obesity and childhood inactivity. And we're trying to move from car-based, we're trying to move it to just a more civilized place where you can walk, cycle, talk, get the bus, and the cars are more like guests, possibly revolutionary as it seems, kept away from the school gate where the vast majority, in their hundreds, of our most vulnerable, smallest people in our community gather on a daily basis, twice a day. So there's lots of design considerations. It was touched on earlier by some of the speakers, and what we trialled during COVID, I still can't really believe it happened. It's sort of our tactical urbanism, but it is permanent. It just went in fast. Were these school zones to try, and in that school zone, the schools have agreed to tell the parents they can't drop off here. So they can't drop off here. Key to the success of them were these pencil-shaped bollards. I didn't invent them. There were in some schools in the UK, but we took them and ran with them, and the kids loved them. So again, it was a bit of a top tip. Get some Insta-friendly stuff that a counsellor's going to love taking a photograph of, and it'll be in the press. And when the pushback comes, as it will, it's just a little bit harder for them to roll back on their support because they've been seen posing with this sort of stuff. Not always universally likes these dots, but they got the message across, and we've kind of designed. We got together with urban designers, with landscape architects, with lots of other people to kind of come up with a more refined version. So that's what we're trying to build in these school zones, with rain gardens, with some seating, colourful elements. We're trying. These are just the thin end of the wedge. We really want to move from school zones to school streets, but there's no reason that wouldn't work as a school street either. School streets should be special. They should have greenery. They should have some seating, some cycle parking, and that sort of stuff. And there should be something celebrating the school. So while we have there's a Sacred to School logo, but we also put the crest of the schools up. And these are kind of examples. We've got loads and loads and loads of examples in the design guide. These are ones that you might do temporarily or quickly, and put cycle parking in, or cycle traps in, and then come back if it's more permanent zones. And what we've done is try and have a national kind of national feature, so it's recognisable across the board. So the colours are the same. The speed ramp, the school branding, the totems, pencil-shaped bollards, that we do for planting, that sort of stuff. And then in and amongst that, you can have lots of different stuff on the carriageway, but it starts to read as a national kind of template vocabulary, as architects would say. So that's me. I'm just going to hand over to Tracy to talk about the present. Thanks.
So as you all already said, my name is Tracy Lyman, and I'm the program manager of the Safe Routes to School program within Compassionate Environmental Education Unit. Some of you may have seen Kira's presentation earlier, and someone mentioned it. Our program really kind of came out of the relationship that Green Schools have already developed over the past number of years with schools in our country. And I guess our role in the program is kind of bridging that gap between schools and the local authorities. So we work around the country. We spoke. I guess ultimately trying to get more students walking and cycling to school and bridging that gap between the schools. So we have an amazing team, very small team, and we're working, as I said, geographically right around the whole country. So there's three overarching aims to the program. So the first one is looking at after-school treatments. So this is kind of focused on improving the visibility of the school approach. Also eliminating congestion from the front of school, making this a more inviting, playful space to be. The second aim of the program is looking at walking and cycling infrastructure. So this is predominantly along some of the routes to school. So it might be footpath upgrades, improved crossing, cycling infrastructure, or potentially also park and ride facilities, which would also look at reducing congestion at the front of school. And enabling students to walk that final part of the journey to school. Then the third aim of the program is expanding cycle parking at schools around Ireland, and that's just the rollout of cycle parking facilities to participate. So as Nola also already touched on, in early 2021, all of the schools nationally were invited to apply to the program, and we had a response from 932 schools, which is a quarter of the schools in the country, which was more than we had anticipated, but which is wonderful. And we're currently actively engaged with 170 schools around the country, and they are within all 31 of the local authorities. So as part of our information collection with the schools, we visit schools at drop-off and collection time. And as kind of also highlighted by Nola earlier, the biggest issue of schools is the level of in response to this, as part of the program, we will be carrying out air quality monitoring at some of the schools pre and post the input of the infrastructure. And that will hopefully give us an idea of the impact of that work over time. We have a town survey that we issued to all schools, and part of the data that we collect as part of that is both how the students are travelling to school and where they're travelling from. So we map this on GIS. This is kind of how we determine which routes we focus our attention for the walking and cycling infrastructure away from the school area. And also hopefully over time we'll be able to map the motor change as a result of the infrastructure as it begins to. We seek a good bit of information from the schools surrounding the types of elements they'd like to see that help to mobilise their students to walk and cycle to school. And then, as I said, with this mixture of data we collect from schools and school population and local authorities and projects they have ongoing in the area, we work at developing a plan with local authorities and the school. So it's a collaborative approach. And then I guess one feature we're finding is this, buy-in from the schools, that they're fully behind this and committed to it is really vital. So I guess in response to that, we help support the school to be able to kind of communicate effectively around the infrastructure that's going in, and also that they have understanding of how to utilise it. So kind of progress to date then on the programme, we have a number of school streets and school zones that have gone in around the country. We have another school street launch this Friday, obviously, which is really exciting. But yeah, there's a lot more work to come. There's been a lot of walking and cycling infrastructure designed through public consultation and due for construction next year. So, yeah, we'll see a lot more progress next year. Thanks, I'll hand over to you.
So I just want to, this is Dublin City's experience, and I think it's similar to other slides that I've gone through, but I think just one of the key things that I want to show you is the car on the path. So this is a big issue across the city, not only during school time, but outside of school time in some estates, where the actual footpath has become an extension of public entitlement to public space. So that is an issue for us. So in Dublin, like other cities, our main problems are parking on the path, school time congestion, idling, and parking in areas called school tierways, which are actually there for emergency vehicles, and generally, just really piling into the area. So how have we in Dublin City Council addressed this? We've wanted to address it for years. And along came COVID, and we had an opportunity to roll out rapidly 67 school zones across the city with funding from the National Transport Authority. And these consisted of pencil bollards to stop the illegal parking, particularly at the school gate, and then the colourful road surface markings to demarcate public space as being priority for children walking and cycling. And they did work, and they had worked. And you can see that from the before and after photos there. And they've been very well received by the school communities and by the school children. Schools had to apply. We had well over 190 school zone applications. We've got well over 27 safe routes to school applications. And it has come to the stage now that every day I go in and I have an email saying, can we have a school zone, please? Can we have pencil bollards? So of all of the elements, the pencil bollards have become identifiable across the city as being associated with school and student safety. And we also found out through the experience that by putting in these school zones that they were actually positively received by some communities where we have broad roads and broad paths. These are mainly housing estates in the 1950s. And by putting in the school zone, stopped the parking on the path, but it also regenerated the community in terms of, you know, a colourful, less grey community. And instead of, I suppose, really flooding the community with the pencil bollards, we took it as a point to put in maybe temporary planters so that in time we'll have green infrastructure into those spaces. There have been challenges in some neighbourhoods aesthetically, particularly the colourful circles have been not well received. And mainly they can get discoloured due to undercarriage pollution from the cars. So the other thing is that sometimes the problem moves down the road, and in some cases the parking on the path still continues, even with the pencil bollards. And when we talk to some children, some of the parents still perceive, actually, this is a really colourful space. This is where I drop off the kids. So we have a good bit of a way to go in terms of communicating with schools back to their school parents that this is how to behave in this school zone. And we're doing that in collaboration with the schools program. One of the interesting things that we tried just with 1 or 2 schools was getting kids to actually go out and do an audit, the school gate observations of their school zone. Get the kids to look at the driving behaviours and the walking behaviours and rate themselves whether their school zone was effective or not. And really, it's the power of pester power. Young people will go back to their parents and say, Mom, it's not cool to go in here. And you can see here, look, the pencil bollards are the size of the kids. So, so the challenges are providing us with opportunities. We also want to try and really engage local communities, because in many cases, schools took it on. They said they were going to tell the neighbours about it. Mrs. O'Brien opened her window on a Wednesday morning. This is the first I've heard of this. And so we really want to try and get more awareness for neighbours about these school zones and the benefits to a neighbourhood. And in some cases, where the pencils have stopped parking on footpaths, it's actually stopped locals from using paths to park on where they've been very narrow roads. So the other opportunity is we want to try and give parents a menu of parking up further from the school respectfully and legally and walking the last couple of hundred meters. And that can only happen at a community level with the cooperation of local community police and local community groups and neighbours as well. So we have a good way to go. And that's it. I'm just going to leave you here now, whether we can... 30 seconds. Yeah.
Video on the last slide. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a menu of the type of school zones that went in Dublin City in 2020.
Brilliant. Well done. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for your attendance and patience. Maybe 1 or 2 questions, if anyone has any questions for the team. Yeah.
I was curious just how funding works for the Safe Access School program at the federal level. Is there just like kind of unlimited money or?
Yeah, sort of, yeah. No, like it will start running out, but at the moment we're just trying to get, there's quite a lot of money put in. After travelers, 320 million per year, and we'd love to spend a good portion of that schools. So it's not really an issue at the moment. But we are, at the same time, we are pushing rapid builds, maybe cheaper, if not tactical urbanism, but rapid build stuff that can stay for about 10 years or 5 to 10 years and then maybe come back. But trying to do the green infrastructure at the same time, it is quite pricey to do, to put in sod stuff, rain gardens and things like that. Yeah. But the ones you saw there, the Dublin City ones, they're averaging about 20,000 per school. They're quite cheap, relatively cheap.
Okay. We have another question over here. Can I ask you just to shout for our online?
Okay, yeah, David T. Dublin again. Actually, this is a comment because I've heard this question a lot. There's actually no additional investment. The overall transport budget is the same. Eamon Ryan has just decided that 2/3 should be spent on sustainable roads instead of motorways and roads. That's the only reason. That's why Finola and her team have to work so hard to make this happen. So well done to you. It's great.
Yeah, question here. Introduce yourself.
My name is Anna Ciprico from Global Designing Cities Initiative. You mentioned there's an application process from the schools. Yeah. Is it a matter of your capacity or are there several criteria using to select them? You can elaborate on that.
Yeah, so the application was open at one point and hasn't yet been open again. And then based on that, the 170 schools were selected on based on a list of criteria for the department. So those including the range of diversity of location, diversity of school type, whether it be primary or secondary, and also diversity in socioeconomic context. Some degree of commitment to active travel from schools, 7% from schools, and then also we also then engaged with the local authorities as well to see what works they had planned in the vicinity of the schools as well, so we would best one.
Yeah, so some of the school zones, one of the challenges was there were arterial roads, 50-kilometre, very heavy traffic. So we're having difficulty putting in the school zone interventions. So we were hoping then the greater menu on the safe routes to school menu in terms of the, like the pedestrian crossings, tables, whatever. So that would have been a criteria. So we were putting forward the candidates for the safe routes to school. We just said, look at these ones. We were having difficulty putting in the.
All right.
With those, is part of the menu introducing 30 kilometre elements for those 50 kilometre hour zones? Does that take too long?
So there's lots of different language, lots of different solutions for different managed. So for that one, it might just be about narrowing the carriageway. Cycle tracks, a lot of our roads will be on the cycle network, so we'd be looking for cycle tracks in for or Debbie Apple's orders, they'll have a whole slate. Yeah, they're not the ones that would be maybe probably spots, but they'll have some way of signaling that the school is there and sort of kind of having a gateway in and out of this particular place where the school is.
Just off the schools, the 990 schools that applied, a very large portion of that is definitely in the region of about 160 schools on very large national routes. So, yeah, there's kind of I guess we're not at the point where all schools are really yet. Maybe.
There's a question online as well, but do you want to go?
Yeah, it's just basically at Alan Martin Transport Scotland. Are you seeing the problem in some instances just shifting 250 metres down the road? It's been quite successful in dispersing the traffic and also with kind of a council board.
No, like there's a bit of dispersal, but I welcome that as a better problem. But in a lot of cases, there has been
it hasn't been measured yet properly, but it will be part of the program. There has been modal shift. You just signal to people, you know, as people were saying in the theory, the default, trying to change the default. If you can't drop off right there, well then I might just try to super value it or little and try and walk there, and sure that's only 2 minutes around the corner. I might walk the whole way. That sort of thing. You definitely got some good data that Rachel had actually in for school streets where we couldn't believe it, like traffic just disappeared where we put in school streets. But in the guide, I have a kind of model based on my own school where we keep the same amount of traffic, we disperse it, but it does show you're keeping it away from the concentrated places where children are. So dispersal isn't actually a problem. So yeah, it's a better problem. That's how we're pushing it. At the very, very, if you get no modal shift, we're still in a better place.
And we did an online survey with the schools that got those 67 school zones. And, you know, well over 90% of the teachers reported that the school is a safer place. There was a reduction in speeding, in illegal parking and the whole lot at the school gate, definitely. So anecdotally and from that online survey, we know there are elements of this that are really wrong.
Okay, there is one question online. It's from Tammy Gabretz, and it says, is there a route for schools to speed up the intervention through community-led projects rather than the waiting list for greens, beyond the green schools? And second part is, and are there any planning issues with your intervention?
Firstly, there isn't at the moment. It's probably something worth exploring, but because it's physical infrastructure on the road authority, there's always going to be certain regulations, road safety audits, that kind of thing, to be done. But definitely with school streets, there's probably, because it's such a less of interventions, there's probably more scope there for community involvement to take up, do it for a week or a month or something like that. Planning, there hasn't been any planning issues. I did it, for our read and we got some planning advice on. There was actually nothing in any of our regulations that said what the road surface should be, what colour the road surface should be. So that's why we could go ahead and do externals, and it's the same for a lot of practical urbanism, I guess. But when we get to, we will be doing routes through schools, we're doing kind of bigger interventions as part of the routes to school, not just a front of school intervention. They are going to plan, they're going to
yeah, I guess like the planning process is somewhat slow.
Yeah.
Which is an impact on the program, and maybe like secondary staff will all of the planning. Each of the local authorities have their own planning office, so then it also kind of creates a little bit of diversity.
Yeah.
All right, I'm very conscious that we're 10 minutes over now as well. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the presenters for both our online presenters and our in-person presenters for a wonderful session. And just a reminder about the conference dinner tonight, and hopefully lots of you will be attending. If you're not, please let the organisers know, because if there is a waiting list for tickets. Okay, all right, thank you all very much.